60-day rapid revision, rare, series. UPSC IAS Prelims 2022. Daily handouts. Day 6 topics. 1. Overview of key ecoterms, ecosystem, ecotone, ecotype. 2. Global methane and carbon dioxide budget. 3. Eco-sensitive areas of Western Ghats, ESA. 4. Protected areas in India, an overview. 5. Global Conservation Assured, Tiger Standards, CA, TS. 6. Operation Olivia. 7. Barnadi Wildlife Sanctuary. 8. Latoria Myra. 9. Daihing Paklai is Assam's 7th National Park. 10. Gharials 11. UNDP Report on Hindu Kush Ecosystem. 12. Avicennia Marina. 13. India's first cryptogamic garden. 14. Norovirus. 15. Conservation of vultures in India. ISBABA's 60 Days Rapid Revision Series, Rare, Notes, Day 6, Environment. 1. Overview of key ecoterms, ecosystem, ecotone, ecotype. Environment is the natural component in which biotic, living, and abiotic, non-living, factors interact among themselves and with each other. These interactions shape the habitat and ecosystem of an organism. Biosphere. The biosphere is the biological component, supporting life, of the Earth, which includes the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. The biosphere includes all living organisms on Earth, together with the dead organic matter produced by them. Habitat is the physical environment in which an organism lives, address of an organism. Many habitats make up the environment. Difference between habitat and environment. A habitat always has life in it, whereas the environment does not necessarily have life in it. All habitats are environments, but all environments are not habitats. A habitat is always a preference of one species. Ecosystem. An ecosystem can be visualized as a functional unit of nature, where living organisms, producers, consumers, and decomposers, interact among themselves and also with the surrounding physical environment. It usually encompasses specific and limited species. E.g. aquatic ecosystem. In the ecosystem, biotic and abiotic components are linked together through nutrient cycles and energy flows. Ecology is the study of interactions between organisms, and the surroundings occurring within an ecosystem or environment. Ecotone. An ecotone is a zone of junction or a transition area between two biomes, diverse ecosystems. Ecotone is the zone where two communities meet and integrate. For e.g. the mangrove forests represent an ecotone between marine and terrestrial ecosystem. Edge effect, edge species. Edge effect refers to the changes in population or community structures that occur at the boundary of two habitats, ecotone. Sometimes the number of species and the population density of some of the species in the ecotone is much greater than either community. This is called edge effect. The organisms which occur primarily or most abundantly in this zone are known as edge species. In the terrestrial ecosystems, edge effect is especially applicable to birds. For example, the density of birds is greater in the ecotone between the forest and the desert. Ecological niche. Niche refers to the unique functional role and position of a species in its habitat or ecosystem. Difference between niche and habitat. A niche is unique for a species while many species share the habitat. No two species in a habitat can have the same niche. 2. Global methane and carbon dioxide budget. The Global Carbon Project's Global Methane Budget and Global Carbon Budget details the sources and sinks of this important greenhouse gas. CSIRO works with many international partners to develop the budget every second year. Carbon budget. A global carbon budget determines the input of CO2 to the atmosphere by emissions from human activities, balanced by output, storage, in the carbon reservoirs on land or in the ocean. According to the latest budget, the total global fossil carbon dioxide, CO2, emissions in 2021 are returning towards their 2019 levels after an unprecedented drop in 2020. Sources. In 2021, most of the world's fossil fuel carbon emissions came from coal, 40%, oil, 32%, natural gas, 21%, cement, 5%, and flaring and other smaller sources, 2%. Just four regions accounted for about 2/3 of global fossil fuel carbon emissions in 2020, China, 31%, the USA, 14%, the EU 7%, and India, 7%. The rebound is mainly due to a rise in coal use in the power and industry sectors in China. Sinks. The land and ocean CO2 sinks combined continued to take up around half of the CO2 emitted to the atmosphere averaged over the year. The remaining emissions stay in the atmosphere. This caused atmospheric carbon dioxide levels to increase by about 2.5 parts per million, ppm, in 2021 to reach 410 ppm. Overall, global carbon dioxide emissions have increased by 61% since 1990, though the rate of increase has varied. Methane budget. After carbon dioxide, methane, CH4, is the most important greenhouse gas contributing to human-induced climate change. Methane remains in the atmosphere for a much shorter timeframe compared to carbon dioxide. However, methane has a higher global warming potential than carbon dioxide, 86 times larger over 20 years. This is because methane absorbs thermal infrared radiation from the sun much more efficiently than carbon dioxide. The amount of global atmospheric methane is increasing by around 12 parts per billion each year. Sources and sinks of methane. Between 2008 and 2017, 60% of methane emissions were human-made. Human-derived methane emissions include, in order of contribution, agriculture and waste, particularly emissions from livestock, manure, landfills, and rice farming. The production and use of fossil fuels, mainly from the oil and gas industry, followed by coal mining. Biomass burning, from wood burning for heating, bushfires, and burning biofuels. The remaining emissions, 40%, come from natural sources. In order of contribution, these include wetlands, mostly in tropical regions and cold parts of the planet such as Siberia and Canada. Lakes and rivers. Natural geological sources on land and oceans such as gas, oil seeps and mud volcanoes. Smaller sources such as tiny termites in the savannas of Africa and Australia. The main sink for methane emissions comes from chemical reactions in the atmosphere that ultimately destroy it. A small amount is also absorbed by soils. 3. Eco-sensitive areas of Western Ghats. Why Western Ghats is so important? It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is one of the 8 hottest hotspots of biological diversity in the world. It has over 7,402 species of flowering plants, 1,814 species of non-flowering plants, 139 mammal species, 508 bird species, 179 amphibian species, 6,000 insect species and 290 freshwater fish species. Thus, the demarcation of an ESA is an effort to protect the fragile ecosystem from indiscriminate industrialization, mining and unregulated development. 2 committees, Gadgil and Kasturirangan, were appointed. What did Gadgil report say? The Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel, WGEP, designated the entire hill range as an ecologically sensitive area. It recommended that no new dams based on large-scale storage be permitted. The existing red and orange category industries should be asked to switch to zero pollution by 2016. It suggested the formation of a Western Ghats Ecology Authority, WGA, a statutory authority which enjoys the powers under the Environment Protection Act. Criticism. The major criticism faced by Gadgil Committee was that it was more environment-friendly and is not in tune with the ground realities. What did Kasturirangan report say? Sought to balance the 2 concerns of development and environment protection. It seeks to bring just 37% of the Western Ghats under the ESA zones, down from the 64% suggested by the Gadgil report. The report recommended a blanket ban on mining, quarrying, setting up of red category industries and thermal power projects. Criticism. The major criticism of the committee is it used remote sensing and aerial survey methods for zonal demarcation of land in WG. The use of this erroneous method had caused inclusion of many villages under SRs. Current status. A draft notification related to the same was issued in 2018 mentioning the areas to be notified in the ESA. And 2020 Union Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change interacted with chief ministers of 6 states relating to notification of ecologically sensitive area, ESA, pertaining to Western Ghats. State of Karnataka opposed the recommendations of Kasturirangan Committee report on Western Ghats. The 39 sites are located across the Western Ghats and distributed across the states, Kerala 19, Karnataka 10, Tamil Nadu 6, and Maharashtra 4. The state of Karnataka has the highest percentage of the ESA 46.50%. Eco-sensitive areas. Eco-sensitive areas, SRs, are located within 10 kilometers around protected areas, national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. SRs are notified by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MoEFCC, under Environment Protection Act 1986. The basic aim is to regulate certain activities around national parks and wildlife sanctuaries so as to minimize the negative impacts of such activities on the fragile ecosystem encompassing the protected areas. 4. Protected areas, an overview. What is meant by a protected area, PA? Protected areas are regions or zones of land or sea which are given certain levels of protection for conservation of biodiversity and socio-environmental values. In these areas, human intervention and exploitation of resources is limited. Serves as the most important units for in situ biodiversity conservation. There are several kinds of protected areas, which vary by level of protection. Protected Area Network in India. Legal provisions, types, present status. In India, there are 4 major categories of protected areas. These protected areas are constituted under the provisions of Wildlife Protection Act, 1972. The 4 categories of protected areas are: 1. Wildlife sanctuaries. 2. National parks. 3. Community reserves. 4. Conservation reserves. Community and conservation reserves were first introduced in the Wildlife Protection Amendment Act of 2002. India has a network of 987 protected areas, covering a total of 173,053.69 km² 2 of geographical area of the country, which is approximately 5.26%. Category number area: National Parks 106 1.35, Wildlife Sanctuaries 564 3.73, Conservation Reserves 99 0.14, Community Reserves 218 0.04, total 987 5.26. Apart from these protected areas, India also has the following: O Biodiversity Reserves, O Tiger Reserves, O Elephant Reserves. Wildlife Sanctuaries. Protection and conservation of wildlife or its environment. Certain rights of people living inside are permitted as long they don't harm the wildlife. Such activities include harvesting of timber, collecting minor forest products, livestock grazing, and ownership of private land. National parks. National parks are given highest level of protection. Unlike wildlife sanctuaries, no human interference in any form. Conservation reserves. They are declared by the state governments in any area owned by the government. They act as buffer zones between established national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and reserved and protected forests of India. Rights of people living inside a conservation reserve are not affected. Examples: Bankapur Peacock Conservation Reserve, Karnataka; Bees River Conservation Reserve, Punjab. Community reserves. They are declared by the state government in any private or community land. The land should not be within a national park, sanctuary, or a conservation reserve. It is basically an area where an individual or a community has volunteered to conserve wildlife and its habitat. Rights of people living inside a community reserve are not affected. Example: Lawan Community Reserve in Punjab, Gogabil in Bihar. Other protected areas. Biosphere reserves. The concept of biosphere reserves was introduced in 1971 as a part of UNESCO's Man and Biosphere Program. Biosphere reserves have threefold aim. Firstly, they aim at conservation of genetic resources, species, and ecosystems. Secondly, they aim at scientific research and monitoring. Finally, they aim at promoting sustainable development in communities of the surrounding region. Sacred groves. They are patches of forests or natural vegetation generally dedicated to local folk deities or tree spirits. Example: Kavalkadu at Puthupet, Tamil Nadu; Gumpa forests, sacred groves attached to Buddhist monasteries, in Arunachal Pradesh. 5. Global Conservation Assured Tiger Standards, CATS. CATS is a set of criteria which allows tiger sites to check if their management will lead to successful tiger conservation. Officially launched in 2013, CATS is an important part of TX2, the global goal to double wild tiger numbers by the year 2022. Sites are evaluated through an assessment and independent review process. Of the 13 tiger range countries, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and Russia have registered and rolled out CATS. 6. Operation Olivia. Operation Olivia is a project carried out by the Indian Coast Guard annually to protect the population of olive ridley turtles during their nesting seasons from December to May. It is carried out off the coast of Odisha, which is the primary habitat range of these turtles. From December till May, round-the-clock surveillance is conducted utilizing the assets of Coast Guard like fast patrol vessels, air cushion vessels, interceptor craft, and Dornier aircraft to enforce the laws near the rookeries. It also seizes unlawful trawling activities. The Indian Coast Guard also carries out awareness programs in order to involve the local community in the conservation of olive ridley turtles. Olive ridley turtles, they are the smallest and most abundant of all sea turtles. Under the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List, olive ridley turtles are listed as vulnerable. In the course of a year, they migrate thousands of kilometers between feeding and mating grounds. Best known for their unique mass nesting known as arabada, where thousands of females come together to lay eggs on the same beach. They are found in the tropical regions of the South Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. The world's largest rookery of sea turtles is Odisha's Gaharmatha Marine Sanctuary. 7. Barnady Wildlife Sanctuary. Barnadi Wildlife Sanctuary is a wildlife sanctuary situated on the foothills of Himalayas bordering Bhutan in the north and Udalgiri and Baksa districts of Assam. The sanctuary is bordered by the Barnadi River and Nalapara River to the west and east respectively. Barnadi Wildlife Sanctuary was established specifically to protect the pygmy hog and hispid hare. This is important for threatened species such as the Asian elephant, tiger, and Gaubos frontalis. About 60% of the sanctuary is reported to be grassland, most of it is now grassy woodland. The vegetation in the sanctuary has been drastically modified by human activity. Most of the natural vegetation has been cleared and replaced by commercial plantations of bombax sabre, Tectona grandis, and eucalyptus and by thatch grasses. 8. Latoria myra. The Latoria myra is a tree frog known for its distinct chocolate color. The word Latoria myra is inspired by the Latin adjective mirum, which means surprised or strange. It was discovered in New Guinea in the region of a swampy rainforest where crocodiles are abundant, malarian mosquitoes thrive and trees are spiky. These factors, in addition to the lack of roads, are being attributed to the delay in the discovery of the species. The frog has a unique combination of moderately large size, webbing on hand, relatively short and robust limbs and a small violet patch of skin on the edge of its eyes. 9. Dihing Pakai is Assam's 7th national park. Dihing Pakai was recently notified as Assam's national park. Assam now has the third most national parks, 7, after the 12 in Madhya Pradesh and 9 in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The 6 older national parks in the state, Kaziranga, Manas, Nameri, Orang, Dibru-Saikhowa and Raimona. The national park encloses the Dihing Pakai Elephant Reserve, which spreads across the coal and oil-rich districts of Upper Assam, Dibrugarh and Tinsukia districts. The name Dihing Pakai is derived from Dihing, which is the name of the river that flows through this forest, and Pakai is the hill at the foot of which the sanctuary lies. The oldest refinery of Asia in Digboy and open-cast coal mining at Lido is located within the national park. The national park is believed to be the last remaining contiguous patch of lowland rainforest area in Assam. It has the highest concentration of the rare endangered white-winged wood duck. 10. Gharials. The gharial, also known as the gavial or the fish-eating crocodile, is a crocodilian in the family Gavialidae and among the longest of all living crocodilians. Gharial or gavial is a specific type of Asian crocodile with a distinctive long and thin snout. It is one of the world's longest reptiles. Adult males have a pronounced boss at the end of their snout that looks like a gara, earthenware pot in Hindi. Hence the name gharial in English. Because of its long, slender snout and sharp, interlocking teeth, the animal is ideally equipped to hunt fish. Gharials are said to have originated in the northern Indian subcontinent. The fossil gharial bones were discovered in the Pliocene layers of the Shivalik Hills and the Namdhar River Valley. They dwell in freshwater river systems, congregating near river bends where the water is deep. They're not well suited to life on land, they only leave the water to sunbathe or nest. Gharials may weigh up to 908 kilograms. They maintain their body temperature by warming up in the sun and cooling down in the shade or water. Gharials, unlike other crocodiles, do not stalk and lunge for food. Their snouts possess sensory cells that sense vibrations in the water. The creatures attack a fish by whirling their heads from side to side and grabbing them in their jaws, lined with over 100 teeth. While adults eat fish, their offspring eat insects and frogs. Gharials rip apart giant fishes and ingest stones as gastroliths, most likely to facilitate digestion or maintain buoyancy. The species is classified as severely endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. 11. UNDP Report on Hindu Kush Ecosystem. According to UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, report, Melting Glacier, Threatened Livelihoods, Confronting Climate Change to Save the Third Pole, the Hindu Kush Himalayan mountain ranges could lose up to 2/3 of its ice by 2100. About 2 billion people may face food, water shortages by 2100. Glacier melting in Hindu Kush Himalayan region is caused by larger anthropogenic modifications of the atmosphere, disruption in weather patterns and precipitation due to global warming, changes in glacier volume, unplanned urbanization. The impacts of melting the Hindu Kush Himalayan mountain ranges are as follows. Threatens climate as well as monsoon patterns. It impacts 10 major river systems which help in agricultural activities, provide drinking water and hydroelectricity production in the region. Socioeconomic disruption and human displacement. The report of UNDP recommended the following. Shifting away from fossil fuel use in energy transport and other sectors, changing diets and agricultural practices to move to net zero emissions of greenhouse gases, improved data and information capacity building and early warning systems. 12. Avicennia marina. Avicennia marina is commonly known as grey mangrove or white mangrove. It is a shrub or tree belonging to the Acanthaceae family. They are generally 10 to 14 m long and have light grey or whitish bark with stiff, brittle, thin flakes. Their leaves are thick, glossy, and bright green on the upper side and grey or silvery white with small hairs on the lower side. As with other mangroves, it occurs in the intertidal zones of estuarine areas. Avicennia marina is a widely distributed mangrove species that thrives in high salinity habitats. Latest reports reveal that Avicennia marina has anti-cancer, anti-HIV, anti-diabetic, anti-inflammatory, and other beneficial effects. They are generally associated with food and crop spoilage. These saprophytic pathogens can grow at low temperatures and thus can spoil refrigerated food. 13. India's first cryptogamic garden. Recently, India's first cryptogamic garden was inaugurated in the Chakrata town of Dehradun, Uttarakhand. The garden will be housing nearly 50 species of lichens, ferns, and fungi, collectively known as cryptogamy. Why is the garden located in Chakrata in Dehradun? This site is chosen because of its low pollution levels and moist conditions which are conducive for the growth of these species. Further, Dehradun has pristine majestic forests of deodar and oak which create a natural habitat for cryptogamic species. Cryptogams. A cryptogam is a plant that reproduces with the help of spores. The word cryptogamy implies hidden reproduction, referring to the fact that they do not produce any reproductive structure, seed, or flower. Due to this, they are called flowerless or seedless plants or lower plants. They need a moist environment to survive. These are present in aquatic and terrestrial places. Algae, bryophytes, lichens, ferns, and fungi are the best-known groups of cryptogams. Plant kingdom can be divided into two subkingdoms, viz. Cryptogams and phanerogams. Cryptogams consist of seedless plants and plant-like organisms, whereas phanerogams consist of seed-bearing plants. Cryptogams can be further classified into three groups based on the various structural and functional criteria of the plant. They are thallophyta, bryophyta, and pteridophyta. Phanerogams are further divided into two classes, i.e., gymnosperms and angiosperms. 14. Norovirus. Norovirus, sometimes referred to as the winter vomiting bug, is the most common cause of gastroenteritis. The virus is highly contagious and commonly spread through food or water that is contaminated during preparation or through contaminated surfaces. Anyone can get infected and sick with norovirus. One can also be infected through close contact with an infected person. Norovirus infection can cause the sudden onset of severe vomiting and diarrhea. Norovirus symptoms usually last 1 to 3 days and most people recover completely without treatment. 15. Conservation of vultures in India. Recently, the Ministry for Environment, Forests, and Climate Change launched a Vulture Action Plan 2020-25 for the conservation of vultures in the country. Ensure minimum use of diclofenac. The Vulture Safe Zone program is being implemented at 8 different places. For rescue centers at Pinjar, Haryana, Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, Guwahati, Assam, and Hyderabad, Telangana. First Vulture Conservation and Breeding Center, VCBC, in India at Pinjar, Haryana. Vulture numbers saw a decline as much as 90% in some species in India since the 1990s, in one of the most drastic declines in bird populations in the world. Vultures. India is home to 9 species of vulture: oriental white-backed, long-billed, slender-billed, Himalayan, red-headed, Egyptian, bearded, cinereous, and the Eurasian griffon. Most of these 9 species face dangers of extinction. Wildlife Protection Act 1972, O Schedule 1, bearded, long-billed, slender-billed, oriental white-backed O rest is protected under Schedule 4. IUCN status, O critically endangered, oriental white-backed, slender-billed, long-billed, red-headed O endangered, Egyptian O near threatened, Himalayan, bearded, cinereous O least concerned, Indian griffon. Between the 1990s and 2007, numbers of 3 presently critically endangered species, the oriental white-backed, long-billed, and slender-billed vultures, decreased massively, with 99% of the species having been wiped out. The number of red-headed vultures, also critically endangered now, declined by 91%, while the Egyptian vultures by 80%. The major cause of decline was established as diclofenac, a veterinary nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drug, said, in 2004, which is used to treat pain and inflammatory diseases such as gout in carcasses that vultures would feed off. Just 0.4 to 0.7% of animal carcasses contaminated with diclofenac was sufficient to decimate 99% of vulture populations. Why are vultures important? Nature's garbage collectors, vultures are the scavengers who do the work of cleaning up and keeping the ecosystem healthy. They also prevent the contamination of water sources, especially in the wild. Day 06 Environment.